Supernatural Season 9, Episode 22, Stairway to Heaven. Interesting episode leading up to the season finale. It goes right back into the whole angel arc, and it's obviously going to be the main point of this season, with the season finale being next week, and it focuses solely on the angels, but we are going to get Crowley in based on the trailer that I got to see after the episode. But this is a really interesting episode, and one of the biggest things about it, aside from Dean clearly just losing his mind, as I just knew he had to at some point, aside from that was, of course, Cass losing his army, and I hated that he did, because of course you want Castiel, and he's the good guy, he's the good angel. Metatron tricked him, and Metatron's the evil guy, so you want Cass to win, and that's just how it goes. You want the good guys to win. And in this episode, he's put in a crazy situation where these people are killing themselves off so that they target some of Metatron's members, and of course we find out that they actually work for Metatron. And one of the craziest things was that Tessa was actually one of Metatron's people. I thought initially it was that these people were tricked into thinking that Cass was actually the one that told them to do it. I thought something happened to them and their brains were basically just messed up, and they thought that it was Cass, or it was actually Metatron, and he made them see what he wanted, which I thought made perfect sense because he actually did that to Cass, or he made him see the trickster and stuff. So I thought maybe he did that on a smaller scale because they're not as important, but he wanted them to start killing themselves off, and of course that would cause turmoil with Cass and his people. But he just convinces these people to kill themselves, and they act as though they were working for Cass the whole time. And that makes sense why they were yelling like, "I do this for Castiel," over and over again, because it just made it more believable that they were Cass's people. And one of the things that happened in the end of this episode, when he had to choose between his army and Sam and Dean, you really got to see that his army was fickle to begin with if they left him off of that alone, because of course they had reason to want Dean punished, because the way he's been acting because of the mark of Cain, it made him real dumb. Like, I'll just be honest, it made him dumb and angry. And in the end of this episode, when he was talking to Sam, he said, this isn't a team, it's a dictatorship. That's just crazy. That's not just anger, that's idiocy. He's losing his mind. And it just built up ever since he killed Abaddon, and it was just going, and you could tell every time he even touched the blade, it made him crazier, and he just kept going. And it really built up in this episode, and it got to that final point, which it sort of had to, with next week being the finale. But it had to, and in the end of this episode, when he cut Gadriel, it just made sense. Like, he finally snapped. He couldn't accept the fact that someone could possibly switch teams after everything they've gone through. It was like, it was an impossibility for him. And it was just crazy to see that. I wasn't surprised, because when he shook his hand, I was really worried, especially since it kind of like, he was shaking his hand and it went into slow motion. And I knew that was just instant trouble, because slow motion, knowing what I knew about Dean and him going through the whole Mark of Cain stuff, I just knew it was just really bad comings for Gadriel. And it was, and he got cut. And hopefully he lived, because I want him to join the team, even if it's temporary and he does end up getting killed next week. I want him to make it. I do like his character. I thought he was interesting in the beginning. Then the story for his character was, of course, amazing, because he ended up being a bad guy the whole time. And I think that was something we hadn't really seen before, where an angel actually pretended to be good for like a long, long time, and then we find out that he's a bad guy. And of course he had already infiltrated the brothers, and then he got picked up by Metatron at the same time, and it was just like, oh, this is something we hadn't gotten before, because if anyone's possessed, it's either by choice, or it's because they need to be possessed because the person's actually good, or it's really simple and the person's bad, we need to be exorcised. But it was a unique take on an angel possession, where the character seemed good and then he's bad, and then he realizes that Cass was right, in that Metatron really isn't looking out for the angels. He's mostly looking out for himself, and he's the one who's really getting greedy. Like, he's making up this story and trying to manipulate all the other angels to join his team. And how he put it to Gadriel about Cass seeming to be really greedy, it showed that he's really the one that's greedy and he just wants everyone to join him. And I get that he's trying to win a war, of course, but you can just plainly see he's the one who's greedy. He's the one having other humans killed off so that he can basically be God and control heaven, even though he won't say he's God. He's like, I think he put it like he'd be like new God or just in charge temporarily or however he put it really early on this season. But you can just, it's obvious. He just won't say what's really happening. But, in this episode, he really played his final card and he did it really well because Cass is now left alone with Sam and Dean, and Dean's losing it obviously, and they have to figure out what they're gonna do and how they're gonna get Metatron while saving Dean at the same time. But it was a great episode, and like I said, his team kind of sucked because they just left him because he wouldn't kill Dean, and they didn't bother. Of course, he hid certain things, but they didn't bother to give him a chance to even be a good leader. They were just following him because he was like, oh, he has power and this and that. But once it's like, oh, he has a certain weakness, and then he won't kill someone who they admittedly, like I said, they had reason because he snapped on the first woman that he didn't kill when he like flipped the table over and threatened to kill her to get answers, and then they thought he killed Tessa when, of course, it was really hard to believe that she would just impale herself. So I understand, but they wouldn't even give him the opportunity because for them it was just black and white, and since he chose to let Dean live, they just all abandoned him. Like, it was just, no one was like, maybe he can be a good leader. They just, nah, we're out of here. So it shows how little faith they really had. It was just, let's get behind the powerful person. And even though they claim that they didn't want Metatron to win because of their ideals, I guess, they clearly showed that that didn't matter at all. It's just who's going to live and who's going to die, because they do want to be in heaven. So it wasn't about who's a good leader. It was just who's going to win. And it really showed in this episode that that's all anyone cared about. They just thought Cass was going to be the winner until this episode. But great episode leading up to the season finale. I cannot wait to see how things just get crazier and crazier. And I can't wait to see what from this season carries on into the next season and what they may or may not introduce. I don't think they'll introduce anything in the season finale because that's not the type of show. They tend to, something bad either comes out of something they did or someone just gets resurrected as a result. So it tends to not just be like, oh, here's a whole new event coming in, but who knows what's going to happen. I mean, we have angels locked out of heaven. As Tessa mentioned in this episode, she mentioned how the people that die who were supposed to go to heaven are just screaming and stuff because they can't get into heaven. I'm curious to see if that plays a role in the next episode where they dive into that more, where some people, someone might be trying to siphon those souls since they can't go to heaven. Maybe Metatron's doing something, or maybe Crowley's doing something just to become more powerful, but who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But it was a great episode this week. Kind of just hate his whole army. Sucked to see Tessa go because she was a recurring character, and she was actually a okay character. I can't really say she was a good guy, but she could have easily just taken Dean any of the episodes where he actually died. But she she was always in weird situations with him too, because I think the episode before last was with Death, and he let Dean be Death for a day. So she was kind of showing them the ropes and stuff, and it was just every time they were together it was a weird situation. But it was sucked to see her go. I thought she would just be in this episode and they'd save her again, and she'd kind of be neutral and just be like, thanks for saving my life. But she's dead now, and I'm still curious. I think all of the angels that die possibly go to purgatory, so I don't know if they're gonna really discuss that or not in the next season, because I doubt they'll just be like, yeah, this is where they are. But it could go along with all the people that are supposed to go to heaven. Those souls are just kind of floating around and scared. Her soul could do the same thing if she technically has one. I'm not 100% sure. I forget a lot of stuff from this show, honestly. But can't wait for next week. Comment below, let me know what you guys thought of this episode. Your favorite parts, your least favorite parts, and of course, what do you think is going to happen in this season finale? We have Dean losing his mind, attacking Gadriel at the end of this episode. We have Cass losing his army. We have Metatron gaining everyone basically. Just the independent faction, or at least the largest independent faction, has joined him. Cass's army has joined him, and of course he has his own people. So there's some things that are happening, and I can't leave out Abaddon being dead now because of course Crowley's gonna try to get a one up on everyone in some Crowley type way. But what do you guys want to see in the season finale, and what do you guys actually think is going to happen in the season finale? Comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.